Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. A lot of new information, a lot of sort of movement, I guess I would say, in the Koberger case. In the movement in the way that the defense is making a lot of motions. The prosecution, as we know, has released some things of late that have seemed to have caused a huge stir. But this is the latest, and you see it up on the screen. Koberger's family may be asked to testify by the prosecution. Wow. That's a biggie. No one ever expected that. And why would the prosecution call the family? Well, one of the reasons was that the defense was asking for the family to be able to get priority seating in the courtroom. And of course, the prosecution doesn't want that. There's 4 families there that lost a loved one, and they're going to seat potential killer's family in the priority seating in the courtroom. But not only that, many members of Bryan Kohberger's family may have pertinent information for the prosecution. And in addition, the defense could use the family members for all of the conditions they're alleging that Bryan Kohberger now has. OCD, ADHD, I don't know, all these alphabet potential, what would you call it? Comorbidities? I don't know if that's the correct word. But all of these things that affect his motor skills, his thinking, and they're going to claim everything that they can get away with. But that may have just thrown a monkey wrench into that. Because now if they call them, and strategy-wise, I'm just talking, obviously the prosecution gets to cross-examine them and vice versa. The prosecution calls them. Now the defense is going to use them for their purposes, where maybe they would have said, maybe we won't call them because it could be a little bit dangerous if we do call them. And with this all remains to be seen. But these are some of the new happenings, and we're going to discuss it tonight. What could it mean if the prosecution calls members of Koberger's family? Will it help him or hurt him? So hold on to your hats, hold on to your loved ones, hold on to your service dog, hold on to your cup of coffee, your glass of wine. You're about to enter true crime from a police perspective. You're about to enter the off-the-cuff zone, the police off-the-cuff zone. There has to be some common sense.
They were the ones who called 911 to get him help, and now they're calling for change.
And now a word from our sponsor. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for betting on all the madness. Even if your bracket is busted, BetOnline has more ways to stay in on the action with a free Sweet 16 bracket and live betting on every remaining tournament game. With the largest selection of odds on everything from college basketball to MLB, NHL, and MMA, BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting source. From every Cinderella story to every hat trick, BetOnline has you covered with odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline, the game starts here. Mando whole body deodorant. The thing that I like most about Mando body deodorant is that it lasts all day and leaves me feeling clean and fresh. It doesn't quit even under the harshest heat and humidity. The fresh feeling keeps me dry and confident. No need to worry about unsightly sweat stains. Mando's starter pack is perfect for new customers. It comes with a solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, 2 free products of your choice like mini body wash and deodorant wipes, and free shipping. As a special offer for listeners, new customers get $5 off a starter pack with our exclusive code. That equates to over 40% of your starter pack. Use code POLICE, police in capital letters, at shopmando.com. Shopmando.com. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. Smell fresher, stay drier, and boost your confidence from head to toe with Mando. Joining me tonight, of course, I couldn't do this alone tonight, is retired NYPD Sergeant, professor at Albertus Magnus College in Connecticut, and attorney. Welcome to the show, Professor Mike Geary. Welcome, Mike.
Bill, good to see you. Thank you for having me on the show tonight.
You know, Mike, what are your thoughts again about members of Koberger's family being called by the prosecution perhaps to testify?
You know, Billy, originally I thought a while ago, that they may be called by the defense in the defense's case in chief to humanize Kohberger a little bit, because the prosecution is going to go after him as a monster, sociopathic, cold-blooded monster. However, the defense would like to humanize him a little bit, get his mom and dad up there, get his sisters up there to talk maybe about his childhood and things like that, just to try a little bit to see if they can get some sympathy from the jury. And that's how I thought it would go. But now, and then maybe if that was even going to happen, it may be only for the punishment phase of the case if he's actually found guilty. But now as we start talking about it, it is possible that if the defense brings in a couple of witnesses that want to talk about ADHD and OCD and some sort of issues he has spatial orientation issues, the prosecution is going to have their own specialist, but also they may call as rebuttal witnesses on their own, and call the parents to say, isn't it true that he played baseball when he was a kid, that he ran track, that he did karate, and you got to be coordinated, don't you, to do those things? So that may be. It's at this point we're starting to see a little bit of the prosecution's case, and especially the defense case with all these motions. We're starting to get a peek behind the scenes to get a sense of what Ann Taylor's thinking.
Absolutely. In the latest drop of court filings, this is from the Idaho Statesman, Bryan Kohberger's criminal case, the prosecution hinted that it might call members of the 30-year-old's family to testify at his upcoming trial. Latah County Senior Deputy Prosecutor Ashley Jennings asked in the Friday following, which was published on the court's website Monday, that if any members of Kohberger's family are listed as witnesses for the prosecution, that they be excluded from the courtroom until they testify. The prosecution has until April 21st to file its witness list. Kohberger, as we know, is charged with the first-degree murder of 4 University of Idaho students after prosecutors allege he stabbed the students to death in November 13th, 2022. The victims were Madison Mogan, Kaylee Gonsalves, Zana Knodel, and Ethan Chapin. And as we know, Kohberger was a graduate student studying criminal justice and criminology at Washington State University and Pullman, Washington. That's another thing, is like when you're trying to diminish someone on one hand, the part of them that is obviously above average is that he's a PhD student.
Right.
Yes, he has all of these afflictions. How is he capable of doing such high-level academic work with all of these potential mental disorders, physical disorders? How is that possible, Mike?
Yeah, Bill, it's the moment you bring up something like a diminished capacity defense, elements of it, he has spatial orientation issues, coordination issues, OCD, ADHD, all these things that, many people may have to deal with these sort of things. And he has to deal with these sort of things, perhaps. However, the moment you bring that up, the prosecution, as a defense attorney, then the prosecution is going to rebut all of the assertions that he's incapable by saying, okay, you say, assuming for argument's sake, assuming arguendo that you do have these issues, you have your own car, you drove across country, You get up and down stairs pretty well to get to your apartment in Washington to your classes. You're able to juggle classes. You're able to walk around a classroom, right, and talk. Without looking at your feet. You can do all of these things that normal people do. And if you are afflicted with this, it means you've overcome it. And so therefore, it's really not much of a handicap, is it, to you? So it's always, you want to bring that up, but you always have to remember, as an attorney, the moment you bring something up, there's an advantage to you. However, that you are always susceptible to a counterattack by the opposing party. And in this case, the more he brings up that he's incapable, physically a 30-year-old man, incapable of doing these sorts of things, the prosecution is going to be able to rebut that.
Yeah, there's you open up a Pandora's box of
Exactly.
possibilities, both for the prosecution and the defense may not like the box that they opened. I want to remind everyone that back in, I believe it was 2023, Bryan Kohberger's sister feared that her brother was involved in the stabbings of 4 University of Idaho students before police swooped on their parents' home and arrested him for murder, according to a bombshell report. Sources told NBC's Dateline that one of the accused killer's older siblings grew increasingly suspicious of her brother and his behavior when the family gathered to spend the holidays together. Her suspicions were so great that at one point, several family members searched Mr. Koberger's white Hyundai Elantra for possible evidence of the crime. Madison Mogan, Kaylee Gonsalves, Zana Knodel, and Ethan Chapin were found brutally stabbed to death in an off-campus home in Moscow, Idaho, that the 3 women shared with 2 other roommates on November 13th. For more than 6 weeks, no suspects were publicly identified and leads appeared to have gone cold. And we know what happened after that. But my point mentioning this, and this is from a newspaper called The Independent, if Kohberger's sister spoke to these journalists, don't you think that law enforcement scooped her up and took a formal interview from her and perhaps another family member? So that would have been memorialized. Her testimony would be memorialized on a complaint follow-up by a detective. And now she can't deny what she said because she was interviewed and she said that on this date. So she can't recant what she said, Mike.
Yeah, it's difficult because if say she actually did speak to a reporter and the reporter got it down accurately and published it, and the police found out and the police said, we better interview her. And the police go to her and ask, did you say these things? Did you actually think your brother was guilty or is capable of killing 4 people in such a brutal fashion? If she denied it, well, then the police are going to look at the reporter, question him, and subpoena his notes. And if his notes say that, this is what she said to me, then they're going to know that she's lying in denying it. And then they're going to interview her, do a real formal interview and go over everything with her. And so therefore it raises a specter that if the defense wants to call her to the witness stand and say, Bryan's always had a terrible time with walking or something, and he's incapable of this, the prosecution is going to say, but isn't it true that you told a reporter that you thought your brother did it? Or if the prosecution calls the witness, the sister, to say, hey, you even yourself said that Kohberger did this, and she might say yes. That's one of the things, as you just mentioned, Pandora's box. The moment the defense or the prosecution opens up a box, you're always susceptible to, all kinds of things popping out that you didn't want to be made issues of in a case. But you're right. It presents a real issue. That report presents a real issue for the defense, way much more, of course, than the prosecution. But it creates a problem for the defense because if she actually admits to those sorts of statements, you don't want her on the stand at that point. Maybe they'll perhaps limit their questioning of Kohberger's family to maybe his mother and father.
Possibly. This is from CBS this morning.
Case, Bryan Kohberger
is all set to go on trial in just a few months for the stabbing deaths of 4 University of Idaho students in 2022. The court documents reveal that prosecutors may call on his family to testify against him, which means they could be barred from attending the trial. Jonathan Vigliotti explains.
As the families of Kaylee Gonzalez, Madison Mosion, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin prepare for the trial of the man accused of killing them, Bryan Kohberger wants his family members in court too. But in a new court filing, prosecutors say they may need to testify, and if they do, they can't attend the trial, adding the defendant has a constitutional and statutory right to a public trial, but that does not extend to defendants choosing whom sits in the courtroom. Koberger's father was seen with him on a cross-country drive just 1 month after the murders, while a manhunt was ongoing.
At this point, it's not certain that the state will call any of the family members, including Koberger's father. What's certain is that the state wants to preserve its opportunity to do so.
CBS News legal analyst Jessica Levinson.
The state wants to make sure that people give testimony just based on their own observations, on what they saw and heard, not what they see and hear in a courtroom because they want to help one side or hurt another.
For months, as prosecutors have been building their case, the defense has been firing back to try to suppress pieces of evidence, including surveillance footage of a driver circling the student's home multiple times just before police say the murders happened. The judge has entered not guilty pleas on Kohberger's behalf, and prosecutors are expected to finalize the witness list next month before the trial set for this summer. For CBS Mornings, I'm Jonathan Vigliotti.
So, there you have it. Will they be calling members of his family? I would think that I would want to cross-examine his father, who drove cross-country with him. How much do you think his father knows about this, Mike? Do you think he's totally oblivious to his son's guilt and or innocence? Or do you think he just wants no part of this as far as testifying?
Yeah, Bill, if I'm a dad like that, I don't want any part of testifying. I do want to be there perhaps to support my son because he is my son after all, and you're supposed to take care of your family. But the problem is that opens up Pandora's box. If he can make it out there and he says he wants to be in court, the prosecutor is going to say, look, all witnesses on my list, I have 25 witnesses, 30 witnesses, 10 witnesses, whatever it is. Here's my witness list. They have to be in isolation. They can't be listening to what's going on in court, because if they testify later on in the trial, they're going to have heard all kinds of testimony from all kinds of people, both prosecution and defense, and it could color their testimony, their candor, their truthfulness. So you want all witnesses to be, secluded. So, it's a really difficult thing for the family. If the prosecution at the end of right before the trial begins, if both Ann Taylor and Bill Thompson agree that they're not going to call the Kohberger family at all, either one of them makes it, if they do that ahead of time, pre-trial, then the Kohbergers can attend the trial and sit wherever they can sit. But that always brings up another thing. What do you do about the security in the courtroom at that point? But if you're the dad, this puts you in a really tough position because you want to support your son, but you don't want to become a target for the prosecution or the defense to try to pick you apart.
Absolutely. Pauline Buckles, Bryan did take that 6-hour detour on that cross-country drive that was odd, and his father said as much. Pauline, I remember that too. Yeah. And it seemed like they took the drive to avoid perhaps maybe an area that would have more state police on it. But it turned out they wind up getting pulled over twice anyway. In fact, that thumbnail that I made for this episode, this is from the state police camera when Bryan Kohberger was pulled over. And that's him and his father. And they were explaining where they were coming from. And I think that the state trooper was a little bit dumbfounded in the way that, well, why did you take the route you took? It doesn't make any sense that, you drove this many miles and the route you took makes no sense. So Pauline You're 100% correct. You can see it a little better now. I always point out in this picture, if you look at Bryan Kohberger's right hand and look at above the wrist, there appears to be a long scar there, which would be indicative of perhaps cutting himself during these, if he in fact is the stabber of these 4 students. And I've pointed it out numerous times. And that would be one of the things, of course, that the prosecution would check to see if he sought medical help or went to an emergency room or a doctor. They would subpoena his medical records. We don't know. I mean, clearly everyone thinks that every piece of discovery has been given to the defense. And maybe it has, but not all of it has been released, as we just found out very recently with the 911 tape, with the video, the tape of the video from the house. So all of these things are slowly coming out, and more evidence from the prosecution, which wasn't released because of the gag order, is now starting to slowly come out. Mike.
Yeah, I remember we had, Matt McCoy on the show, and then he was on another show, and they asked him about, what about the quantity of evidence? He said it's overwhelming.
Mike, you're referring to Matt Murphy.
Oh, Matt Murphy. I'm sorry, Matt Murphy. Right, Matt Murphy.
I called him Steve Murphy the other day, but it is Matt Murphy.
Poor Matt Murphy. We can't get his name right, but he's done cases where there's multiple victims, and he's done some of these cases. And he's done death penalty cases and hundreds of murder cases he's prosecuted. He knows the kinds of evidence that are gathered by the police and the public. And I don't know, because I was never in the detective division like you and Phil. So I don't have the knowledge, a base knowledge of what is collected in all these cases. Matt knows, Phil knows, but the public doesn't know because of the gag order. And unfortunately, many people think or thought previously that they didn't really have much evidence on Koberger, that it was only one thing. They're hanging their hat on just the touch DNA on the knife sheath, and like they had nothing else. And the truth is, they've got a lot of information that is now being released, but over the next probably 60 days, 90 days, there's going to be a lot more evidence being released and being argued over and counter argued over by the defense, by Ann Taylor and Bill Thompson. And by the time the summer rolls around, because the trial's supposed to start in August, I think, we're going to know a heck of a lot more about actually what evidence they have. And it's probably twice as much, 3 times as much as we already know.
Absolutely. This is from Fox.
The suspect in the Idaho student murders is attacking key pieces of video evidence in his capital murder trial as being too vague and too much for his legal team to process before the trial.
Item 1 from his attorney's defense motion posted today on the court website is the surveillance footage from the apartment complex on Linda Lane, just a few hundred feet away from the crime scene. This is the viral security video we examined in episode 2 of our Bryan Kohberger Inside the Idaho Murders documentary. The clips shared by true crime bloggers supposedly show a driver circling the student's home multiple times just before police say the murders happened. But Kohberger wants the footage excluded because the prosecution handed over the raw video, 12 hours of it. His lawyers say they don't have the time to sort through it and examine what's relevant. Kohberger makes the same objection to 9 other security camera videos, all of them from the night of the murders, and taken along the route police say Kohberger drove to get to the victim's house. No word yet on when the judge might make a ruling. And if you haven't already, make sure you check out Fox 13's docuseries, Bryan Kohberger Inside.
Could you imagine that a defense attorney objects because they don't have the time to go through? Are you kidding me?
I'm shaking my head. I can't believe it.
That is so lame. Like, if the judge would be, that's too bad. Then you hire assistants to go through this. You don't have the time. That is
imagine if they turned over edited, pre-edited footage. The defense would be saying, you need to give us the entire tape unedited. You only gave us a small edited portion that makes our client look bad. You didn't give us the whole thing. That's why they got the whole thing, so that they can understand that this is the entire length of the tape, 2 hours, 15 minutes, whatever it is, not touched by the police, not edited down to a few short clips. And for her to say that, Like you said, that is the lamest excuse I've ever heard.
And I don't see any judge say, "Oh yeah, you're right. We'll hire Warner Brothers to go through it for you." You know,
No.
it's like it's so ridiculous. This is from Court TV.
The defense team filed a motion asking that his family get priority seating. The prosecutors say that they should not be allowed in the courtroom before they give their testimony. So does this mean that his mom, his dad, and his two sisters are on the witness list? Well, you'll recall Kohberger's dad was with him when he was first stopped by police.
He was right up on the back end of that van, pulled you over for tailgating. Is this your car? Okay, cool. Where are you headed?
Well, we're coming from WSU, and
what's WSU?
University, basically.
Koberger's trial is set to begin in August. He's accused of murdering these four beautiful young people: Madison Mogen, Kaylee Gonsalves, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin. So if Kohberger's family is called to testify, how could they tip the scales? And let's also talk about them being in the courtroom. Let's bring in criminologist, professor at St. Thomas University, and author Dr. Debbie Goodman. Okay, Dr. Debbie, let's start please with what his family members could potentially offer as witnesses. I have no idea. I would love your thoughts on this. What do you think the state thinks they could possibly get from them?
Thank you, Julie. It's a really delicate matter. Opening statement, by the way, was spot on when you were talking about victimization and the victimization experience that really transcends just the victims themselves. Tragically, as we know, the four beautiful lives lost. But as you said, what we call in criminology is primary, secondary, tertiary victimization. So although heinously, sadly, tragically, Maddie, Xana, Ethan, and Kaylee lost their lives, that's the primary victimization. But now to the point in the question of the family members are considered the secondary victims, and tertiary would be the rest of us. So believe it or not, all five families, when we include Bryan Kohberger's mother, father, two sisters, and then of course the parents and the siblings and the extended families of Maddie, Ethan, Xana, Kaylee, are really experiencing very similar dynamic in terms of guilt and shock and anger and sadness. But what potentially could come when Bryan Kohberger's family members would appear in court? It would likely be conversations about his up, possibly in the teenage years. You know, when was he actually diagnosed with autism? That would be an important revelation, I believe, to set the tone for what the defense is saying. Not so much that the autism led to Bryan Kohberger's decision, as we've discussed, but rather his nonverbal cues. And then it's also alleged, Julie, that Bryan Kohberger participated in heroin use. And if the family members speak to that, that could also be quite revealing. But I would imagine that they're going to use words that are very delicate and sensitive about their own son and their own brother, potentially words like different and unusual. But I can't imagine anything really inflammatory that would come from the parents nor the sisters.
Dr. Debbie, this is such great insight. I could listen to you all day. I want to come to one of your lectures and join your students and hear so much more from you. So yeah, great points you made about some of the things the family could shed light on that don't have anything to do with the offenses he's accused of, but that paint the larger picture, his upbringing, if he is living with autism, if he did struggle with heroin abuse. These are all great points. And as you know, delicate issues. Could we talk a little more? And thank you for the kind compliment about my opening statement. And I love the explanation you gave us about how these family members, they're secondary victims, as you noted. And by law, you know this, Dr. Debbie, instant victims, the primary victims, all their families have the right to be there. It's codified. They have a right to be in the courtroom. Where Bryan Kohberger's family, there isn't a law in the books that says you're allowed in the courtroom, but just I think human compassion dictates. Are you surprised that the prosecutor would be digging in to say, stay out of the courtroom until you testify, especially knowing this is a capital case?
Let me just answer that. The family can't sit in the courtroom and then be called as a witness to testify because they'll be influenced by what they hear in the testimony. So I don't know if that's what Dr. Debbie answered, but it's a very simple answer. Of course, they can't sit in the courtroom and then testify later on because you'd be totally prejudiced by what you've heard. That's a no-brainer, Once they testify, I still don't think they'd be allowed to go back in the courtroom because what if the prosecution and the defense wants to recall them later on in the trial? So I think once they're identified as a witness, boom, they're not going to appear in that courtroom, Mike, period.
Yeah, Bill, if you have a prosecution defense witness, they're going to be someplace else. I remember waiting to testify in a district attorney's office. I remember waiting outside in the hallway to testify as a police officer, and that's how it's done. Usually once you testify and both sides stipulate that you're not going to be called back, there's no anticipation that you're going to be called back, then you can sit in the courtroom. But if somebody's thinking about a rebuttal argument and says, no, Your Honor, I want to reserve the right to recall this person at a later time, then you're right, Billy, they got to go out. They have to go out. They cannot listen to any other testimony. And that will make it tough on the Koberger family because Dr. Debbie's telling the truth, because the Koberger family is suffering because of what this guy did. And so they are suffering too.
Well, allegedly did.
Allegedly.
We'll get slaughtered for saying that, Mike.
Sorry, you're right.
Allegedly did.
No, you're
Folks,
right.
This is police off the cuff, real crime stories, if you like. Real crime, true crime. From a police perspective in the right location. And if you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button. Give us a thumbs up. Hit the like button. That helps us with the algorithm. Share us with your friends and your family. If you want to contribute to us financially, we have a Patreon with 4 different levels. And we also have a YouTube channel members with 5 different levels. And we appreciate all of our fans, our friends that contribute to the show and keep it going by helping us out financially. I want to play a little bit of this from the Today Show. Again, this is about Bryan Kohberger's purchases.
Koberger allegedly taken just hours after prosecutors say he murdered 4 University of Idaho students back in 2022. The selfie, part of a trove of new documents revealing how lawyers on both sides may be planning to argue their cases at his murder trial in August. Among them, this filing detailing Koberger's Amazon purchases, which his attorneys have been fighting to get thrown out as evidence. According to prosecutors, Koberger bought a K-bar knife and sheath just months before they say he killed Maddie Mogen, Ethan Chapin, Xana Kernodle, and Kaylee Gonzalez in their off-campus home. According to police, a K-bar knife sheath was found next to one of the victims, with DNA they say was a statistical match with Koberger.
What does a knife sheath at a scene mean? That's going to be the ultimate question.
The filings show Koberger's attorneys are prepared to point to other possible suspects, writing, "This case is full of alternative perpetrators. The state has chosen to focus on Mr. Koberger at its own peril." They also point to new cell phone data, which they say shows the morning of the murders, the 2 surviving roommates were awake, texting, and on Instagram earlier than previously known, and hours before they made a chilling, newly released 911 call.
911 location of your emergency. Hi, something is happening. Something happened in our house. We don't know what.
After the murders, police say one of the surviving roommates told them she saw a masked man with bushy eyebrows in the home. Prosecutors now revealing that after Koberger's arrest, she told police, "I have no clue whether Koberger was the same man she had seen." The defense has said Mr. Koberger does not have bushy eyebrows, but prosecutors now including this new photograph in their latest filings, writing, "Whether or not Bryan Kohberger can be described as having bushy eyebrows is a factual determination to be decided by the jury."
And Liz, has the defense given any more hints about what they're going to use as Kohberger's alibi here?
Well, yeah, Laura, as you know, up until now, his attorneys have said he was out driving alone at the time of the murders. Well, they're now asking the judge to allow witnesses to explain why that behavior could be linked to his autism diagnosis. They say that that diagnosis is why he has difficulty sleeping, which has led to his habit of driving at night. They are also saying Kohberger suffers from physical impairments and does not have the speed and coordination to commit the murders, get to and from his car, and change his clothes in the time frame that prosecutors have laid out. And remember, a judge has entered a not guilty plea on his behalf, Laura.
It'd be interesting to see what the judge does with that. Liz, thank you.
So, some of these things are baffling to me. Is like, is there any, prior proof that he's autistic? Is there any prior proof that he has physical disabilities? Is there any prior proof that he can't sleep and he drives around? I just, like, a defense can just raise these things. But is there a medical doctor, someone with MD after their name or PhD after their name in psychology or whatever would diagnose this? Has anyone with those letters after their name made these diagnoses and not a defense attorney, Mike?
Billy, that's the $1 million question, because what the party that raises, in this case, the defense attorney, the party that raises the issue must be able to they have the burden of proving and laying a foundation for witnesses to come on to support their assertion of physical disabilities and ADHD and OCD, whatever they want to say, and that heroin has hurt Bryan in some way. But like you say, part of providing for that foundation and bringing in witnesses, they're going to have somebody somewhere, not just someone to talk about, well, ADHD is this and OCD is that. No, you're going to have to get somebody with an MD or PhD degree to talk about, I knew Bryan when he was 12 years old, that he had issues. He was diagnosed at 14 with this. We have a record of it, that sort of thing. Not just somebody to talk about it in general, but to say they know Bryan, and they know this is what has happened to him in the past. That's going to be very difficult, because you can't just have somebody talk generally. You have to have a doctor who actually has worked with him in the past that can show you notes that he had on Bryan to back up the claim that he's had these long-standing issues that go back years that mean that he cannot, get himself barely out of bed without help. That's totally on the defense. I don't think they could meet that burden.
Unbelievable. Emily Parkinson, thank you for the $5 super sticker. Is the autism stretch an admission to guilt without admitting guilt? I don't think so. I think it's a defense. They're trying to say that he's incapable for some of these, because of some of the afflictions that he has. And the defense is throwing, you've heard a million times where a professor says when you have an exam that's an essay, and they say, throw so much crap at the wall, something will stick. That's what this defense attorney's doing. She's throwing so much at the wall that maybe something will be believable. And then she's bringing up ADHD, autism. There was some other alphabet disease he allegedly has, which I'm not buying. One of the things I just want to raise, because no doubt the touch DNA on the K-bar knife sheath button is the strongest evidence they have. However, 3 other sources of DNA that to us have yet to been identified are contained in this crime scene. One from a glove that was found on the property, and then 2 other sources, I believe, of male DNA. Now, obviously, if I was the prosecution, I would make every attempt on this earth to identify who that DNA comes back to, and then to either somehow eliminate them. That will make my case stronger against Bryan Kohberger. Because if I don't do that, then it's going to look like they're creating doubt, aren't they? How do we know one of those other 3 DNA samples that are on different parts inside this house could not be the perpetrator? Mike.
Yeah, that's a good argument. That's what Ann Taylor is going to do, because you have a loose string out there that needs to be tied up, and the defense and the prosecution can't do that. And as Ann Taylor says, There's many other possible witnesses, and Brian Thompson is going after Kohberger at his own peril. The fact is, however, that no crime scene is perfect. That glove that was found actually outside of the house might have been dropped by a student. There's 500 students walking around that area. It might have been dropped a week earlier, not even noticed. It might have been dropped by a reporter falling from his pocket. What it means is that we don't know whose it is because there's no DNA match on any website. That's all that means. And now Ann Taylor, of course, is going to do her best to say, look, that glove means there's a possible second person, and therefore it doesn't necessarily have to be Kohberger. However, nobody else's DNA is on that knife sheath, which is a huge, really strong piece of evidence, but Kohberger's. And so therefore Thompson can argue, okay, fine, there's a hair or a piece of DNA that we don't know who belongs to, but we do know whose DNA is on that knife sheath. That's
100%. And I think that's the most important piece of evidence, because it's a knife sheath that is found underneath one of the bodies of the victims, and it comes back. It's identified. Apparently, as far as we know, the other 3 DNA samples they may have, we don't know if they're identified. The prosecution could already have them identified for all we know. We don't know. But as I said, if I was Bill Thompson's crew, his investigators, his other attorneys, I would try to get those DNA samples identified in the same way. And the expense will be crazy because it'll cost a lot of money. None of this stuff is free, but they will have to do the same thing that they did with Bryan Kohberger, genetic genealogy, investigative genetic genealogy tree. I want to play this from Koberger. This was from last night.
Steve lost his daughter, Kaylee, that tragic morning. We've talked a lot, Steve, over the course of this last 2.5 years, and it's been hard on you more than anybody, just with the big order and hearing things that make you think there was a chance that maybe Bryan Kohberger could beat the rap. You saw what I saw. You saw what Brian Enton just laid out. There is a knife purchase. There is a sheath purchase, a sharpener, and that selfie and that map. Tell me your thoughts as you see all this new evidence come out.
We've been sitting on this one a little while. I'm glad. I mean, finally. I've always felt like anything coming out of the court that any of the fact finders are going to have to see is the safest thing in the world to show. What could mess this up is a jury hearing all these YouTube people that just make up stuff and call speculation. Speculation is just another word for lying, creative lying or storytelling. But these are facts. So I don't know why we're 2.5 years into this trial or into this process that we're finally letting out the facts. But man, it feels good. It feels good to see the true fact and all the work and everything that these guys have done. I just wish we didn't have to wait 2.5 years to see it.
The detail is remarkable, and the photograph of Bryan Kohberger in front of the shower at 10:31 a.m., seemingly very proud. When was the first time you saw that?
Just a few hours ago. That's an FU to Idaho. I just went into your state. I just killed your kids in their beds, and you're not going to catch me. I'm just going to shower up here, clean off the last bit of the evidence, probably take the shower curtain. Who knows where that's at? But that's a challenge to Idaho. So I hope everyone from Idaho is paying attention, and we need to bring everything at this guy.
Were you at all made aware that this massive document dump was about to happen tonight, and that we'd see the map, how many times the white Elantra was seen in front of your daughter's house, that we'd see that photograph, that we'd see the evidence, the purchase order for the K-bar knife sheath and the sharpener? Did you know this was coming?
I didn't know when it was coming, but I've seen some of this footage before. I would suspect even the officer's seen some of the stuff. So I know how powerful it is. I know how good it is. I had no clue who I was looking at. I had no clue what I was looking at. I just seen cars. I seen a white Elantra. I seen it come and go. I didn't know what I was looking at. I didn't even know what the time of the crime line was, but it's just hard to sit on the truth for so many years and be told that you need to do everything to help the person who killed your daughter. You're supposed to help him. And it's like, yeah, it's very frustrating because I just want the truth out and I want people to see what the truth is. Stop listening to these idiots that think, speculation is evidence. It's not. It's absolutely not. What's coming out of the courtroom right now is evidence. And the fact finders, they'll decide if it's one way or the other, but it's still facts.
I'll go one further. This is some of the strongest evidence I've seen yet since they found the sheath and since they found the DNA on the sheath matched Bryan Kohberger. I thought of you immediately, Steve. I thought, man, this is going to be good news for him because all you want is a case that's strong. Am I wrong in what I imagined you'd feel like?
Yeah. We were torn when this all happened, but I really wanted to embrace and love the community that I'm a part of. I wanted to say that we did everything right and we got the right guy. But then we just, this whole process, and I don't understand it, guys. I'm just a dad trying to rage through this to figure out how to get justice for his daughter. No, nothing holding me back. No rules, no nothing. I'm just trying to get the evidence and the truth for my daughter. So that's what I was doing. But now, 2.5 years later, I've learned there's an order of things and all this stuff, but it feels good to show and highlight all the hard work that the FBI did and Moscow Police Department. It feels good to see that, and it's just a little puzzling why we had to wait so long, But it feels like we're finally getting there, and some of these trolls can go find the bridge that they came from and return to it.
Thanks for watching.
Wow. You really feel for that man, Steve Gonsalves, the dad of Kaylee Gonsalves. Emily Parkinson, a new member, has also just gifted 5 police off-the-cuff memberships. Emily, thank you so much for your generosity. Very, very much appreciated. When I hear a lot of people talk about this case, there's a whole contingent of people that believe Bryan Kohberger is innocent. And I always mention, one of the things I always bring up is something called circumstantial evidence. And attorneys sometimes, depending on which side of the fence they're on, with prosecution or the defense, they view circumstantial evidence as strong or weak. And the truth is that circumstantial evidence, when there is a lot of it, is extremely powerful because it tells a story. It doesn't just tell a story, but it connects, let's put it in those simplest terms, it connects the dots to innocence or guilt. And circumstantial evidence simply means from which inferences are drawn. That's right out of the definition of circumstantial evidence. So his white Elantra, is that a smoking gun? No, that's circumstantial evidence. But it's caught on camera driving around the house at the time of the murders. And it's also can be connected, when you connect the dots, can be connected to Washington State University and traveling toward 1122 King Road until, of course, Bryan Kohberger turned his phone off. Because don't forget, he's a criminology student, PhD student. He understands how the police work. And he understands some of the things that are needed to get away with a crime. So then we look at some of the other evidence, of course, right? And the most powerful that I mentioned before is the DNA on the knife sheath, the touch DNA on the knife sheath. Then more circumstantial evidence. He bought a K-bar knife and a knife sheath on Amazon 8 months before these murders. Does that mean he did it? Absolutely not. Is that circumstantial evidence? You bet it is. You bet it is, right? There's so much more circumstantial evidence that they do have. The bushy eyebrows, does that prove anything? It proves nothing. Absolutely nothing. Except, does he in fact have bushy eyebrows in this picture? His selfie picture taken on the morning of the murders? Did Dylan Mortensen not say that the man she saw in the house had bushy eyebrows? Yes. Does that mean he did it? No. Is that circumstantial evidence? Yes. I know, Mike, you feel like you're a freshman at my criminal justice class, but I'm just trying to explain this so that the naysayers that say, oh, it doesn't mean anything. No, it does. It means a lot, Mike.
Yeah, I was looking in the chat and someone named Blaireau was mentioned about the picture, and she said it really doesn't really mean anything unless he's found guilty. But the truth is, though, that photograph tells a lot. It's a picture of what it's an exact representation of what Bryan Kohberger took himself within a few hours of the homicide occurring. Does it mean that he did it? No, but what it means is this is what his face looked like on and captured. That image of his face was captured at a time with the timestamp as close as possible to the actual murder. That's not a picture taken 6 months later or 2 years earlier. It was taken within about like 4 hours or 6 hours of the homicides taking place. So it's really important to show what Bryan Kohberger looked like on that particular day. So it's really important for that. And it's up to the trier of fact, the jury. It's up to the jury to determine whether or not, in their opinion, that picture as represented by Kohberger that he took shows a man with large bushy eyebrows. So that's important for that. But yeah, it's all circumstantial. You put all those little, as Bill, you put it all together. You put it all together, one after the other, after the other, after the other, after the other. And the prosecution is going to use that as to allow the jury to come to the conclusion, inferring that all of those things together means that Bryan Kohberger is, and no one else is, the killer. So it's absolutely important, because it's really rare that you actually get absolute direct evidence, but almost everything is circumstantial. And in this case, there's a whole heck of a lot of it.
Dana Hodgkin, BK took kickboxing classes and ran 6 miles a night.
Yeah.
If they have people that could come forth with that type of information, then these little theories that the defense is trying to lay into will be thwarted by other witnesses. Some of the other things, and I want to play devil's advocate a little bit here. Am I disturbed by the fact that so far they found, or as far as we know, there was no blood found inside his car? Am I disturbed by the fact that perhaps there was no blood found in his apartment? And we don't know for sure, because that could come out soon and we'd be like, wow, we didn't know that. Amazing. But can we explain how he got no blood on him after slaughtering 4 people with a K-bar knife? Tough not to get blood on you. Very tough. And I'll admit that. I've been to hundreds of homicide scenes. Tough not to get, but he, again, was a criminology student. Could he have wore a Tyvek suit? Do you know what a Tyvek suit is? It's those suits that zip all the way up with a hood on it. Gloves. No doubt he wore gloves, right? Could he have had little booties on his shoes? You bet, except remember early on, there was a bloody footprint on the downstairs floor, and it was a specific type of shoe.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they ever matched up that shoe to Bryan Kohberger. We could find that out too. Like, woo. And would that mean he did it? No, that's more circumstantial evidence if in fact they matched that up. So yes, I am bothered by these things, but could it be possible It's possible. It's improbable. And I'll admit that. It's improbable that you would kill someone, 4 people, with a knife and not have blood inside your car. I cannot explain it. I cannot explain it. Mike.
Yeah, we do know at some point from when they did the search warrant, executed the search warrant in his Washington.
Mike, can I stop you for 1 second? Jackie, thank you so much. Jackie at Happy with a Twist Acrylic. Pause, plus. It was a Vans shoe. You're right. Thank you so much for that information. I had forgotten that.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, the Tyvek suit is one of the things that they invoiced from the results of the search warrant executed on his University of Washington graduate apartment, was some sort of coveralls. So he may have had several pairs, but that's probably what he had. And then he had time to clean up the car. You're right. 1 drop of blood would have been perfect. And you would have expected there was a lot of blood on clothing, but he probably was very well prepared with the garbage bag, put everything inside the garbage bag outside of the car, got in, took off his booties and things like that. He's very thorough. You know, he may not know how to get away with a crime, but he knows enough to thwart police and to get away with it for a short period of time. But you're right. The Tyvek suit, the gloves, the booties, and able to clean his car maybe numerous times, taking it to a car wash, having them go over it.
Because Mike, let me just interrupt you because this crime occurred November 13th.
Right.
He wasn't caught until December 30th.
That's right.
So he had a lot of time. He could have cleaned that car with bleach 14 times and killed all of, if there was blood. Someone in the chat named Monster, what is a Vans shoe? Monster, it's a brand of shoe that they identified it from the bottom of the shoe, from the imprint it left on the floor of the house. So that whoever the killer was potentially was wearing Vans shoes. I don't know specifically what a Vans shoe looks like. I just know that the bottom of, you know how every shoe has its own design on the bottom?
Right.
Especially sneakers have that also. This Vans shoe left a very particular imprint on the floor that was identified as a Vans shoe. So did they in fact find that shoe or those shoes at Bryan Kohberger's house vis-a-vis the search warrant? I don't know. And we don't know right now because that wasn't on, I don't know if it was on the warrant return or if they would in fact haven't released it yet. Mike.
Yeah, Bill, you'd like to know because it could possibly be, there's several totally innocent explanations that it could be one of the frat brother or somebody. I can't remember the young man's name who actually, when the girls were making the 911 call, he was there. I can't think of his name now. It might have been him. It might have been someone else. I hope it wasn't someone like an emergency responder who came in and just stepped inadvertently. You know how crime scenes are out in the street, you know, and when you don't take discipline and cordon it off. So it could be something like that. If it's the same, but they can match it up to a shoe or a purchase of a shoe if they can't find the shoes that Bryan Kohberger had, and if it's sort of the type of shoe and it's the same size as his foot, then it's circumstantial evidence of his guilt being there. But I hope it's his shoe and not some other innocent person, and that probably caused a lot, going down all the effort to try to find whose shoe that actually is.
100%. Barbara RN54. Who wears gloves and places their own trash in a neighbor's receptacle? Barbara, 100%. But guess what? Circumstantial evidence, right?
Right.
The fact that he was cleaning his car at 4 o'clock in the morning. Circumstantial evidence. You know, doesn't everyone clean their car at 4 o'clock in the morning? You know, wearing gloves. Doesn't everyone throw their trash in their neighbor's trash can? Circumstantial evidence, right? So all of these things are, again, when we say pile up the evidence on top, and circumstantial evidence starts getting very powerful. Monster, again, a question about the Vans shoe. I never owned a Vans shoe. Is it for males? I don't know about Vans shoes. Apparently, this one was for a male, and they identified the sole, the bottom, that from the imprint. That's all I could tell you. I don't know what more you want to know about the shoe, because it's just like, O.J. Simpson, when he was found not guilty, but many people believe he was guilty. When he did the crime, he was wearing something called Bruno Mali shoes.
Yes.
And they were very distinguishable. They were, at the time, very expensive type shoes. And he said, I wouldn't wear those ugly ass shoes. And lo and behold, they had a picture of him wearing them. So again, circumstantial evidence doesn't mean he did it. But again, piled up high, circumstantial evidence is really good. Phil Grimaldi in the chat. That shoe print is powerful. Phil, very powerful, especially if they find the shoes in his house. And we don't know if they ever did find the shoes in his house. So, yeah, again, the Vans shoe. Nina Chandro in the chat. Good to see you. Circumstantial evidence. It's Barbara RN54. Vans makes male and female shoes. Thank you, Barbara. I wouldn't have known that. I'm not a shoe person. I wear sneakers almost every single day. So rare that I wear shoes. Bird Dog. Did he search for Tyvek's clothes online? Unknown. And I'm not saying he did wear Tyvek's. I'm suggesting a suit like a Tyvek suit could have covered your whole body. And then you could have had hefty bags on the scene before you got in the car, took off the Tyvek suit or whatever suit you're wearing, thrown it right into the hefty bag and disposed of it. You know, throw it out in the woods or burn it. He had plenty of time to do that. I'm not saying I know what he did with it, but these are ways, if he, in fact he got away with it without leaving blood, these are ways he could have accomplished that. Mike.
Yeah, Bill, it's, we're speculating as to what may have occurred because you've seen these kinds of things in other cases. We don't know. We'd have to find out from, any other evidence dumps that we get from the court at this point. We'll know, of course, when it comes to the trial. But yeah, everybody is very, I mean, I would love to know what they found at that University of Washington apartment, because if they did find a part of a suit, a Tyvek suit, then you go look at his search history, and they've looked at his search history up and down, left and right, back and forth, every which way till Monday. But and they would probably know already if he did purchase one online or if he went to a hardware store. They're going to look at his credit cards, so that would be important. But it seems to be the most, as far as we know right now, the most plausible explanation as to how he could, keep himself free of blood and keep his clothing free of blood and his car free of blood.
This is it's amazing. I was able to do this as we speak. This is a Vans shoe bottom. So as you could see, very distinctive bottom. So if that was the shoe or the type of shoe or something like the type of shoe that Bryan Kohberger was wearing, and this imprint, in fact, was on the floor, and they find this shoe in his home, it is extremely, extremely powerful evidence. Actually, it would be unbelievable evidence, and they could even match it almost up exactly to the footprint they found in the house. Your thoughts, Mike?
Yeah, I'm looking at the chat, and Emily Parkinson had a great observation. Didn't they find a receipt and a tag for a Carhartt jumpsuit in his apartment when they did the search of his apartment? And you're absolutely right. They did. They absolutely did. And so that shows that he had bought some sort of outerwear that may, so different type of outerwear that may have been worn and disposed of, and so that his clothes wouldn't get bloody. So you're right about that. Very good observation. He did have something like that in his apartment.
The love of God. Yes, shoe print pattern, but also Ethan and his friends supposedly also wore size 13 shoes. Yeah, I mean, but just like you would have to do elimination fingerprints, you might have to do elimination footprints as to who was in the house. And was the footprint made in blood? That would also give us somewhat of a time frame of when the footprint was put down on the floor or the rug or whatever it is. So you could see, Monster, what defines firm evidence? A print, DNA, I would assume a body, a weapon. That's not a term, firm evidence. That's, there's physical evidence, there's testimonial evidence, there's circumstantial evidence, there's real evidence. I never heard the term firm evidence. Have you, Mike?
I never heard of that term firm. No, that's not something in a legal vocabulary. No.
But please keep asking questions, and if we don't know it, we won't try to answer it. But I have that's not a term that in the criminal justice world. But so as you could see, this trial coming up, there is so many different aspects to it. There is so much evidence, yet there is so much possible doubt that a defense attorney can raise, and the prosecution must prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt. And what's reasonable? That's for the jury to decide. Mike, your final thoughts.
Yeah, Billy, as you point out, that's up to the jury. The jury is what they call the trier of fact. They determine in their deliberations, what actually is the most important things that they've heard, the testimony, the evidence, the exhibits, and all that stuff. So it's up to them. Ann Taylor is an excellent attorney. She's doing a great job for her client. She's doing the best she can, given the case she's dealt with. It may seem like she's actually asking for crazy stuff to be, the argument over bushy eyebrows. But you got to remember, she's doing the best she can for her client. And in the end, it's going to come down to that trial, and that jury is going to decide what is important and what is not important. So just hang on, and we'll bring it to you as straight and accurate as we can.
Phil Grimaldi, question to Bill and Mike. Do you think there is much more evidence that has already been released? Yes, I personally do. I personally think they have evidence that's going to just knock the socks off this case, and it's going to start coming out as more of this information is released. Don't forget, this gag order precluded a lot of this information from coming out. The gag order's off, they could slowly start releasing some of this evidence that they have. Do we really need to try this case in the court of public opinion? No, we don't. The only place it's important is the courtroom, and that's a fact. But the court of public opinion, people have made up their minds, and we'll see. We'll see what happens. Folks, I want to thank everyone for tuning in tonight. Again, if you haven't subscribed, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, hit that like button. Mike, do you have any last words?
No, just thank everybody. The chat was wonderful tonight. I was looking at it the whole time. Excellent.
I think that even Mike is still obviously a college professor, but I was a college professor for actually like 10 and a half years part-time, and then I did it full-time for 5 years. So I still have that thing in me where I'd like to teach every once in a while,
Yeah.
And even in the police, it was always felt good to teach a young cop or even a young detective or learn something from someone else. Because I think that we all go through life. We should all have the opinion or that you're a student forever. Because once you stop being a student, you stop learning. And I feel like I can learn something from anyone. And having an open mind like that, I think that's the best way to be. Anyway, folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a great night, and God bless everyone.
One episode just ain't enough.